Syphilis in the soldier in the First World War. The Army had declared war on sexually transmitted diseases in the 1920s, during the same time that the First World War was happening. Symptoms of syphilis. Syphilis is a bacterial infection that is spread by sexual activities, which include vaginal, anal, and oral sex. Once infected with syphilis, there's a lot of symptoms that could occur. These symptoms include bumps on the face, hands, genitals, and the body. A skin rash could develop, and slow healing sores could also develop. These sores can often be painless, but once they start, they typically appear on one's mouth, rectum, or the body. And now onto the barracks in Dublin. During this time, records from the public stated that 300 out of the United States Army's 15,000 soldiers had been infected with either syphilis or gonorrhea. It might not seem like a lot at first, but 300 out of 15,000 is 20%. So 20% of our soldiers have been infected with these venereal diseases. Half of the reported syphilis and gonorrhea cases can all be traced back from the barracks in Dublin. There was a lot of barracks that had been built during this time of war to provide housing for our soldiers who were fighting for the country. Syphilis in the armed forces. Many soldiers were already exposed to venereal diseases during the First World War. As mentioned by Karen Zipp, many men who entered the armed forces had venereal disease, and the military had determined that a key to controlling disease in the armed forces was to isolate it in the civilian population. By doing this, they wanted syphilis and other venereal diseases to spread. The numbers of United States soldiers who had syphilis had skyrocketed from September 1917 to June 1918, as there had been 80,000 reported cases. 85% of these reported cases came from the civilian population, and the rest of the 15% had been contracted after they had enlisted in the armed forces. During the First World War, the Army had discharged over 10,000 men because they had contracted syphilis or gonorrhea. And now onto the soldiers' reputations. Since the outbreak of the venereal disease, soldiers had developed a somewhat less pure reputation than they used to have. A response to this was President Wilson had launched a campaign to improve the image of the nation's armed forces. As Karen stated, new ideal of the American man as sexually pure, self-controlled, physically fit, and willing to accept broad responsibilities at home and abroad. Almost every soldier that had caught syphilis claimed to have contracted it from a civilian. As a result of this, almost everyone that was viewed as a threat to the armed forces' health would be isolated and quarantined. And now onto women near military training camps. Many women and girls who were known as delinquent women or simply camp girls were women who settled near military training camps all throughout the nation. The War Department began to build detention houses and detention hospitals. All women and girls, with the exception of the ones whose cases had severe, more harsh punishments, who had been arrested, may be held in these detention centers as they await trial. While in these detention centers and hospitals, they would be studied and treated medically. President Wilson made a huge push for this and even provided funds for this to happen. He stated that the main goal was to reformatate and rehabilitate these girls and women who would be proven to be a menace to the health and morals of the men in training. Syphilis propaganda in the First World War. Many propaganda was used throughout the First World War's era that portrayed many American soldiers being told that women are poison and to fight their temptations. Most of these propagandas were used for military soldiers to help prevent the diseases. In response to many propaganda, the military began handing out condoms to newly enlisted military soldiers in efforts to stop these venereal diseases from spreading. In 1917, a film named Whatsoever a Man Soweth was a Canadian film that was directed by Joseph Best. This war film was a World War I syphilis prevention film, as it warned many soldiers about the dangers of contracting syphilis. This movie warned them against engaging with prostitutes, and they showed the many effects that syphilis does to them and to their children and family. This film was basically propaganda that the military could use on their soldiers in order for them to stay safe from venereal diseases. Other countries and syphilis. The New Zealand Medical Corps suggested that 16,000 of their soldiers had contracted such diseases. However, these were just the numbers that were reported. Many suggest that there were many soldiers who didn't report they had venereal diseases. In 1917, General George Richardson stated that about 7,600 New Zealand soldiers were being infected annually by syphilis or gonorrhea. And now on to France. The France government had focused on balancing healthy sex with disease control, which encouraged birth rates all while attempting to stop the spread of these diseases. And now on to England. As opposed to other countries, England's approach to these diseases were severely harsh. The England military had punished any soldiers who had contracted a venereal disease. The Defense of the Realm Act of 1918 came into effect, which gave England the power to punish these soldiers. And now finally onto post-war. Gonorrhea and syphilis had followed the troops when they had been deployed back to the United States. This happened not only in the United States, but other countries as well. As Jane Tollerton stated, venereal diseases clinics set up in Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch, and Dutton in 1919 were soon overcrowded. Many allied countries still maintained their anti-venereal disease measures, which shifted from the military to the civilian population once the war had ended.